Salazar here, and today I'm going to do a video about the Distrezz-it-All. This is version 2.0. I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between the two versions. This is version 2.0. It has a plug that is removable. The reason why we did this was so that our international friends can also use the Distrezz-it-All with the different voltage for their countries. There is a metal wheel inside that never has to be sharpened. It is built to last and last and last. The wheel does go in the direction of the word zetter, and I will explain why you need to know that a little bit later when I start using the tool. And then on the back, there is this little trap that you can open, and this is where most of the paper pulp goes when you are using it. If you let it get really full, you'll see like a little party happening. The papers will be kind of coming out of the top of it. So if you keep it cleaned out, then most of the paper will stay inside. You're still going to get a little bit on the outside, but you won't have the huge piles of snow that you get when using scissors or a hand distresser. For version 2.0, we've slowed the motor down a little bit. The reason why we slowed the motor down is because when designing it the first time, I was working with a lot of men, and they thought if fast was good, faster was better, and that turns out to not be the case. Most people won't run across it unless they're doing a really big project, but it does heat up for the first version, and sometimes it has a safety feature where it'll turn off and you gotta wait a few minutes for it to come back on again. So version 2, that doesn't happen. Also, the slower motor makes it a little bit more quiet. Also makes it so that it's a little easier to control your papers when you're distrezzing. The first version, it did pull the paper through rather quickly and kind of made people nervous to use it a second time. But most people, if they got over that first initial, wow, that's strong, they just use it constantly, like me. So that's pretty much it for the features. And now let's talk a little bit about what this baby can do. The Distrezz-it-All can pretty much distress almost anything. Some things that are fabulous in the Distrezz-it-All are my corrugated board from Zetter. This is one of the 7x7 packs. And all you do is just push the button on the side. Keep your, whatever you're going to distress flat. You don't want it on an angle because that will make it skip across. And so you can see what that does to the edge compared to an undistressed edge. Even from the side, you can see how fun that makes the edges of your projects. You don't have to just distress in one direction or the opposite direction. You can also roll it back and forth, bounce it across, do certain areas more than others, and you can even get a very distressed girly grunge rounded edge. But you're not going to get something that's exact. It is something that I like though. I like that look. So that's just with cardboard, but how does it work with papers? I've got a small stack of watercolor paper here. There are several sheets here. The Distrezz-it-All could go through even more than this. As long as it fits inside of that channel, it can distress it. However, where it is flared out at the bottom, that is as much as the paper can flare out. So if you have a lot of paper in there, it's not going to be able to flare out so much. So if you want a light distress, you can use a whole bunch of papers at once. But if you really want to make the edge of the paper fluffy, which is what I call it, then you have to use fewer pieces. So I've got 7 pieces of paper here, and we're going to distress all of it at once. And this is the kind of distress you can get. You can see the difference in the thickness. But if I only do 4 at a time, it can get a lot more distressed. So these are the two sides. This is only 4 sheets, and this was with 7. So you can really see the difference. So that was watercolor paper. And I'm going to show you some of the other mediums that I really like to distress in my Distrezz-it-All as well. This is my mixed media stacks from GCD Studios. There's craft label papers, a really thin, almost tissue craft paper, manila paper, and then the watercolor paper that I was just using. Right on the packaging, it does say that the mediums are compatible with the Zetter Distrezz-it-All. These are some of my favorite things to use if I'm going to be distressing stuff on my project. I showed you some of the watercolor paper earlier, but I'm going to show you can also do it one sheet at a time. And you can lightly distress. Or you can get that heavy distress. So this is the light side and the heavy side. We're also going to try it with the manila paper. And that's one sheet. And I love how crazy you can get with the edges. Now this is a very thin craft paper, which makes the most amazing die cut flowers and kind of frilly things because it's almost as thin as tissue paper, but it's that craft color. So it's very girly grunge. You can distress one sheet of this at a time. It does work a little bit better if you will use 2 to 4 sheets or even more at a time. So this is the craft paper. So you can see that distressed edge. But we're going to fold this up. And we'll do 4 at a time. And so you can see, I love when this stuff happens. Sometimes I tear this off, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I like having the extra little crazy bits hanging off the end of my projects. And the last thing I'm going to show from the pad is the craft label paper. You can see this side has the adhesive on it. But it still manages to distress the edge. It actually makes it a lot easier to pull the backing off as well. And in case you were wondering, it is okay to distress stuff if there is glue or adhesive on it. And unless there's some really clumpy glue inside, it should not affect the Distrezz-it-All. Okay, so those are all the basic uses for the Distrezz-it-All. Now I'm going to show you some of the things that I also use it for that I think are very handy, but people may not think of as a common use for the Distrezz-it-All. This is a great use for the Distrezz-it-All. This is the clipboard wood from Zetter, and yes, the Distrezz-it-All will distress this. I have taken some of my papers and I have covered the wood, and when you do this, you want to make sure you get the glue all the way to the very edge of the paper for this to work well. You may be able to tell that the paper is not perfectly aligned with the clipboard wood, so we're going to use the Distrezz-it-All to line all the edges up. So now you can see that there's no wood showing outside the edges of the paper. The paper goes completely to the edges of the wood, and it has a little bit of a distressed edge. Not a whole lot. Now when you're going to be distressing something that's really thick like the wood, you're probably going to want to go only in the direction that goes against the wheel because it will give you a little bit more control that way. You cannot distress denim, canvas, or anything that has string in the Distrezz-it-All. When I got my very first version, prototype, they asked me to try to break it. and I couldn't break it. The only thing that did finally get the motor to stop turning was when I was trying to do material and the string got all wound around the wheel. We could fix it. We got all of the string off of the wheel, but you don't want to push it. It's better if you do not ever distress anything with string inside of the Distrezz-it-All. But chipboard, on the other hand, you can distress. So again, this is a little bit thicker, so it's better to do the distressing against the wheel, but I'll show you what it looks like going in both directions. And so this is what you end up with. You can tell this is very, very thick material, but it goes through the Distrezz-it-All like it's butter. So if you're going to be using die cuts, a lot of people, they like that really clean edge. So even though I have a really nice clean edge, I will distress this anyway, just to give it a little bit of a girly grunge look. You might think that the Distrezz-it-All is really for more, very grungy, edges only kind of a thing, but you can actually use them for things that are a little more delicate. I love doing fussy cutting. I'll cut images out of my papers, and then I will use the Distrezz-it-All right on the edges to give it a very shabby, girly grunge look. One of my new favorite uses for the Distrezz-it-All is on my Bitty Blossoms die. People may think that this is too delicate to distress, but, well, you can't be really crazy with it, but you can do it, and I'll show you in just a second. But the result is absolutely amazing. So I'll show you how to distress a die cut from the Bitty Blossoms. This die cut is from the manila paper, and it's easiest if you start from the center and work your way around. And I am going to go in the opposite direction of the wheel, like I said, because you have a little bit more control. And I'm just very lightly going to touch it to the wheel. So you can see what this distressed edge does and why it makes it so cute. I hope you've enjoyed this video and maybe you've learned some new things that you can do with your Distrezz-it-All, or maybe learned some reasons why you want to buy a Distrezz-it-All. For those of you who do own a Distrezz-it-All, we are having a contest. Zutter is giving away a $100 shopping spree for the person who creates a really great video showing the Distrezz-it-All in use and some projects that they've created using the Distrezz-it-All. Design airplane. Trash truck. Right on the packaging, it says that it is compatible with the. Right on the packaging, it does say that the. Oh my gosh! And what I'm going to use the Distrezz-it-All. Gosh, you may be able. Holy cow! That there is sassafras.